So these are the inferences that I have discussed, that what based on the discussion what we are able to do. So can we go to the next slide? One more slide, please. Yes. So now let's see a most popular scheme of doubly fed induction generator and how it is going to work, how it is able to meet the different grid connection requirements and simple schemes. So please see that this is a induction generator based wind energy converter system, doubly fed induction generator shown here. The stator side is directly connected to the grid through a power transformer, which is shown in the right hand side. There are two circles are there, which is a transformer. Rotor side is connected to a power electronic converter system, generally known as rotor side converter, which is having left hand side as a AC connection, right hand side it is a DC link. Then there is a line side converter which is connected through this DC link, and the right hand side is a AC link. So overall, this is known as back-to-back power-tonic converter. So this scheme is shown here, which is able to convert AC from AC to AC. In this case, we can see that rotor side converter is connected to the rotor of the doubly fed induction generator or wound rotor induction generator. This rotor is going to have a AC of slip frequency, rotor frequency, and it is able to convert this AC power into DC, and then this line side converter is able to utilize this DC link to have a right hand side, which is a voltage and frequency of the grid, which is grid connected. So this is how the different frequency and voltage levels are there. The prime responsibility of this rotor side converter is to control the active and reactive power of the doubly fed induction generator. How it is doing? It is able to inject the active and reactive power into the rotor side. It is also able to take the reactive and reactive power out of the rotor. So both of the way it is able to inject as well as able to absorb active and reactive power. So that's why this overall scheme is also known as doubly fed induction generator. By taking the power out, or by taking the slip power out, the scheme is able to control the speed of the wind energy converter system, and hence we are able to see that a active power output of a doubly fed induction generator can be controlled. If you remember, we have seen the turbine characteristics also. By making this system wind energy converter system variable speed system, a active set point can be controlled. How it is actually in a control system? By utilizing a lookup table. In this lookup table, the data is stored in the form of uh, active power set points versus the speed of a system. So the input to this lookup table is wind speed. As the wind speed is changing, the active set point is and the reference speed is coming out from this lookup table, and it is set as a control input for the rotor side converter. So this is how we are able to achieve. Now you also able to see that rotor side converter can also utilize this DC link voltage or DC link bus value to insert a reactive power to this doubly fed induction generator. It means it is acting as a static compensator, and hence the utilization of the reactive power for this doubly fed induction generator is coming from the rotor side converter into the rotor circuit, and it is not able to utilize the reactive power from the grid side, and hence from the grid it is can be treated as a zero reactive exchange. And if it is required, rotor side converter can send more amount of reactive power to the rotor, and hence this rotor power, active reactive power, can go to the air gap and then to the stator and can fed to the grid also. So it means by utilizing this rotor side converter, a active and reactive power of the stator can be controlled, and this is the prime objective of this rotor side converter. Now let's see, whenever the rotor side converter is either injecting a power into the rotor or taking a power into the from the rotor and feeding to the this DC link, this DC link voltage is going to change, and the responsibility of to maintain this DC link bus voltage is lying with the line side converter. So this line side or grid side converter is continuously either taking a power from the grid and sending to the DC link, or taking power from the DC link and sending it to the grid. But overall responsibility is to make the DC link voltage constant so that rotor side converter can operate. So this is how the different control philosophies are there for the control of this rotor side and the line side converter. Now we are also able to see some other devices into this circuit. Let's see how they are working. So see, a chopper is there in DC link voltage. Why this chopper is there? This chopper is there to have a fault right through capability of double-fed induction generator. So whenever there is a fault is happening at the grid, a current is going to be injected in this circuit which is of higher value. So when the voltage is going to be reduced due to the fault condition, current is going to flow in this loop of rotor side converter, line side converter, or the rotor circuit, which may damage this Partonic converter. So generally, for the safeguard of this double-fed induction generator and the Partonic converter, earlier the Partonic system, double-fed induction generator, or wind turbines used to get disconnected from the grid. But it is no longer possible with a new grid connection requirement. It is expected that for a certain time, as the fault rate through capability curve you have seen already, the system should remain connected to the grid and should be able to participate in the normal operation of the grid. So this is expected. So what will happen if a current is increasing in this rotor circuit? The chopper is going to come into the picture. The chopper is having a resistances with the dam, and this chopper, when it is going to come into the picture, it is going to dissipate extra amount of energy which is in the DC link. So it is able to maintain this DC link voltage as well as to dissipate the extra amount of energy which is coming due to the increased current. So this is how it is able to operate and to maintain the safety of this rotor side and line side converter. And the researchers are able to claim that by operation of this chopper, a very severe faults are able to fault right through by utilizing this chopper. So hence it is working fine. And this chopper are also double-fed induction generator installation, and they are also working fine. The next solution which is also provided, that if a chopper is also not able to having a capability of vault right through, then crowbar will come into the picture. Crowbar will come into the function. What is that crowbar? Crowbar is also a set of resistances, but controllable by using semiconductor switches. So once a chopper has started working and let still the fault is not able to write through, then crowbar will come into the picture. Crowbar, as soon as the crowbar will get a signal and will operate, the rotor of the double-fed induction generator is going to be short circuited. The rotor of this double-fed induction generator is going to be short circuited by using this crowbar, and at that time the double-fed induction generator will become a simple squirrel cage induction generator, where rotor is short circuited by the external resistances, and the semiconductor switches are able to control the currents from this rotor circuit, and hence it is able to dissipate the extra amount of current and the extra amount of energy in this rotor circuit. But what will happen to the overall DFIG? The overall DFIG is now converted into a squirrel cage induction generator where rotor is short circuited. The power electronic converter of RSC and LSC are now not into the loop, and hence we are able to see that the system becomes a simple squirrel cage induction generator. So that's why this scheme is also known as short-term interruption, as we have discussed during the fault rate through capability of the DFIG or the wind turbine. A short-term interruption is possible. This is what known as short-term interruption, where DFIG is now working as a squirrel cage induction generator. During the squirrel cage induction generator, still the active power is fed into the grid as a simple squirrel cage induction generator, but reactive power capability is gone because rotor side and line side converter is no longer in the rotor circuit. So hence, the during the operation of this crowbar, the capability of providing of a reactive power from the rotor side converter is removed, but a line side converter is still connected to the grid by utilizing this DC link voltage, and this line side converter can now act as a static compensator to provide the reactive power requirement of the machine as well as to the grid. So this is why a control philosophy is required, that when a crowbar is in operation, the line side converter can act as a static compensator, or during the normal operation also line side converter can act as a static compensator to provide the reactive power to the grid by utilizing this DC link bus voltage. And hence we can see that overall W5 induction generator can have a fault ride through capability also, can provide the active power also during normal and abnormal condition, as well as it is able to utilize the Partonic converter to provide the reactive power. So this is overall a DFIG operation. If it is there any question or doubt is there, then please feel free to let me know on the operation of W5 induction generator.
Sir, I do have a question, please.
Yes.
Yeah. Sir, during the abnormal condition, how this line side converter is going to provide this reactive power support, sir? Could you please elaborate, sir?
Okay. So during abnormal condition, one possibility is that when the crowbar is also in operation. So during that time, overall rotor circuit is now disconnected from the W5 induction generator. Fine. So DFIG is now simple squirrel cage induction generator. During that time, line side converter is now having a connection to AC side, which is connected to the grid, and it is having a DC link capacitor or DC link voltage is also there. It is just simple as a static compensator. Have you seen a static compensator or active power filter? So this will act as a static compensator. The line side is simply connected to the grid, and it can act as a static compensator and will be able to inject the desired reactive power, as well as it is also able to inject a desired harmonics into the system also to reduce the harmonic or to improve the power quality. So both of the operations are possible. Is this clear?
Yeah, okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Fine. So I will show you a control schematic also of these two converter. At that time, once again, I will highlight that how this line side converter can act as a static compensator, because during, or let take an example also, let even the wind is also not blowing. Fine. W5 induction generator is simple idle and it is not rotating. What is the utilization during such time of this converters? Because the converters are already installed. So now take an example, when W5 induction generator is not rotating, it is stalled condition. Rotor side converter is simply connected to the rotor side. But now let's see, this line side converter simply can act as a static compensator or a Partonic converter, which is connected to the AC side and having a DC link voltage. This once again can be act as a standalone active power filter or static compensator. It is just a control philosophy and it need to be exercised if it is required. Fine. Next slide, please. Yes. So some of the researchers have also proposed a additional series grid side converter. In this case, we can see it is utilizing the same DC link voltage and SGSC is provided, which is injecting a series voltage in between the W5 induction generator and the point of common coupling. Why this is being provided? Because some of the researchers are able to see that during a fault condition, there are severe oscillations are happening in doubly fed induction generator due to poorly damped poles in the stator flux, and hence this compensation can be provided during the abnormal condition, and which is acting just a series compensation to reduce the uh, oscillations by having some damping into the system and to have a well behaved system. Next slide please. In this slide we can see the what is a typical control structure of a rotor side converter. Now please see the left hand side, which is the control of a rotor side converter. Here you can see there is a reference set point for a active power is there in upper control scheme, PS star, and then PS is there. So this PS star, as I have already mentioned, it is coming from maximum power point tracking algorithm from a lookup table. This lookup table is having a data stored for a given wind speed, what should be the speed and what should be the active set point. So as the wind speed is changing, our maximum power point tracking algorithm is continuously giving us a new active uh, power reference set point. So this is how we are able to obtain. And once we are able to measure the what is the actual active power, and this error is processed through the PI controller. And once this active power error is processed through PI controller, the current reference is being generated for the Partonic converter known as rotor side converter, and it is able to inject a desired current into the rotor side, into the rotor of a doubly fed induction generator, so that the speed can be changed, so that this desired active power error can be reduced. But the below figure, below control structure, you can see it is about the reactive power requirement. This reactive power requirement is coming from the grid side, that how much reactive power is required by the grid, on how much reactive power, whether it is to be injected or is to be absorbed, it is coming from the grid side or the operator side. And this reactive power set point, when it is given to this, and then reactive power, what this wind turbine or wind energy converter system is interchanging with the grid is measured, and based on this error, once again the Partonic converter of the rotor side converter is controlled, so that a current is being injected from this rotor side converter into the rotor of a doubly fed induction generator to reduce the reactive set point. So if you are having any doubt in these two control structure, then please let me know. Now please also see that right hand side there are two control loops are there. These control loops are for the grid side converter or the line side converter. The upper figure you can see a DC link reference voltage is there, and the actual DC link voltage is measured, and this error is processed through the PI controller, and then Partonic converter of this grid side converter is now once again current is being reference is being generated, and it is fed into the grid, so that the DC link voltage always remains at a reference set point. So this is how the DC link voltage remains constant and the rotor side converter is able to operate normally. Now the below control loop, you can see only a half loop is showing in this. This is where you can see a grid side converter will be able to utilize its capability to provide the reactive power, because you can see in this I'm just showing only the control loop to have the current control of this grid side converter, because in my scheme in doubly fed induction generator I am not utilizing this as a static compensator to utilize for the reactive power. But similar to the rotor side converter, another PI controller can also be provided, by which a reactive set point can be obtained from the grid, and a original reactive power measured can be there, and a error can be processed, so that this current can be calculated what need to be injected into the grid during the normal or abnormal condition. So this is how, by providing a control structure, the grid side converter can also be controlled. In this case, still we are not utilizing the grid side converter completely, because we can utilize this grid side converter as a active power filter also for the compensation of the harmonics into the point of common coupling. So this can also be done, or it can be obtained also. So this is how a different control philosophies can be there for the control of the converters of the doubly fed induction generator. So it depends on the requirements and the application, that how much is required. Here just I would like to give one more input here, that if we want to utilize the grid side converter for different operations, we need to make sure that its rating is also updated or augmented so that it can provide the reactive power, because mostly the grid side converter is designed to provide only the, or to process only this active power which is coming or going into the rotor circuit. So if you want to provide more reactive power, if you want to provide active power filter functionalities, the rating of this grid side converter is also need to be augmented so that it will be able to have a sufficient capacity for the reactive currents also. Fine. The next slide, please. Yes. So here, this particular control loop is for the series grid side converter control. In this case, a logic is being utilized that whenever there is a fluctuation in the voltage at the grid side is there, a compensation can be provided from the series grid side converter, and otherwise it is just going to inject a or act as a short circuit, and there is no voltage is being injected. So this is how a series grid side converter can be utilized for the uh, during the abnormal condition to improve the performance of the doubly fed induction generator. Next slide, please. Yes, in this case, we can see if it is required, the series grid side converter control can be utilized also for generation of the reactive power and to fed for the machine or to the grid if it is required. That can also be achieved if by utilizing a additional set of controller by having a reference set point for the reactive power, which is shown here by QSE star, which is a additional reactive power support from the these converter. So that is very much possible, but there is a problem of circulating reactive power into this whole loop is also there, that also need to be addressed. Fine. Next slide, please. One more slide. So what we have done, we are able to check the control functionalities of series grid side converter by having a system of a simple wind farm. Next slide, please. In which a 1.5 megawatt of wind farm is there, which is having a connection with 120 kV grid. The systems is the doubly fed induction generator is of 575 volt, and then a transformer of 25 kV to 125 kV is also utilized to be connected to the grid, and there is a distribution feeder of 25 kilometer. In this case, a system is simulated for and presented here only for the voltage sag, where 50% of voltage sag has happened. So next slide, please. So these results are showing here for conventional doubly fed induction generator, where stator PCC voltage is going to have a 50% in the reduction in the voltage due to the voltage sag condition. Then we can see the currents and the different parameters are having a oscillations. Next slide, please. And then we can also see once again the results here, that different power quantities, torque, they are also going to have the oscillations. This is about the normal doubly-fed induction generator. When the simulation is being performed, all protection circuits are being disabled. So this is how we are able to observe the parameters. Next slide, please. So these results are for unified doubly-fed induction generator when series grid side converter is also being introduced. So once again, for a 50% sag, we can see that oscillations from the stator flux, voltage, and different quantities are now reduced, and the system is bit more well behaved with less oscillation, because series grid side converter is able to have a series compensation so that these oscillations can be removed, and system is a well behaved, well balanced system is there. Next slide, please. These are the also some of the quantities are there of the stator current, stator power, and torque, where we can see the system is bit balanced. Okay, next slide, please. Yes. So overall, in this case, we can have a conclusion here that doubly-fed induction generator is a very good system, a very economic system, and it is able to address the grid connection requirements by its different control philosophies, and by utilizing the chopper and the crowbars, it will be able to meet the severe grid connection requirement proposed in the different countries and different electric grid codes. So that is very much possible, and by utilization of the functionality available with the rotor side converter and stator side converter, it is possible to meet the strictest grid connection requirement for the reactive power supply also. So a W-fed induction generator is a good scheme of a wind turbines or wind energy converter system, which will be able to increase the renewable energy penetration into the grid with a possibility of meeting the strictest grid connection requirement. But slowly a trend towards the converter connected into the stator side is catching up, and overall it is being felt that synchronous machine with a stator side power converters are more robust as compared to other schemes, and hence the other than the production of the renewable energy with a concern of more stable grid, the synchronous machine with a stator power converters are now more installation. So it also been felt that synchronous machines are also well designed, well established, and the good amount of studies are also being carried out for their performance and its operation with a different operating conditions. So that's why these schemes are getting more, because the concerns are more about the stable and secure operation of the power systems are there. So this is how the trends are changing. Now, please, next slide, please. So now we are able to discuss about the second smaller topic of known as reactive power capability of wind turbine. We have already understood the operation of the wind energy conversion system and doubly-fed induction generator in specific case. Let's understood a reactive power capability which is demanded by the system operators for an induction machine and how it can be obtained. So next slide, please. So doubly-fed induction generator, we have seen that it is a back-to-back converters are there, and doubly-fed induction generator, by utilizing these two converters, are able to produce a reactive power as well as able to absorb the reactive power. So that's why a capability curve is possible for this overall scheme, by which a operating point of a operation of the whole scheme can be commented upon. The capability curve of a synchronous generator, which is generally we have read, is also shown here in this diagram. So similar capability curve is required. In this capability curve, you can see is required to have a different limits. The active power production, the reactive power production and absorption is also need to be mentioned in that. So the limits that what we are able to identify is about the stator current limit of a W5 induction generator, rotor current limit of a W5 induction generator, as well as rotor voltage limit of a W5 induction generator. Stator is directly connected to the grid, so that's why the stator rating is always fixed. Next slide, please. So what we have done, we have developed a steady state model of W5 induction generator to develop a capability curve. In this, different limits of the W5 induction machine, like stator is connected to the grid. So other than this, stator current, rotor current, and rotor voltage are being considered. And then finally, we are also able to consider the reactive power provided by the grid side converter. And while doing this study, we have maintained the maximum power point tracking algorithm operation of the W5 induction generator. So next slide, please. So in this case, we can see a steady state model is developed. The equations are shown here. Yes, the equations and the steady state model is shown here. This parameter is being taken for a 1.5 megawatt of W5 induction generator, and steady state quantities are being considered. Next slide, please. The first limit what we have considered is rotor voltage limit. In this rotor voltage limit, the steady state model is being now once again being rewritten in such a form that PS and QS, the active power and the reactive power of the W5 induction generator, is written in this form, and this limit is being considered, and the different curves are being obtained for, as I mentioned, for the operation of W5 induction for maximum power point tracking algorithm. Different values are the synchronous speed, some of the slip values are below the synchronous speed. So but as we understood that W5 induction can be operate as a generator for super synchronous as well as sub synchronous range uh, uh, of its operation. Next slide, please. Similar curves are also obtained when a rotor current limitation is also being considered, and these characteristics are also once again plotted for different slip values. Next slide, please. So this is the curves for the rotor current limitation. Next slide, please. This is for the stator current limitation. So these are the different curves. Next slide, please. So when all these limitations are being considered, a single capability curve of W5 induction generator is also obtained, which is shown here for a optimized slip values. Now this capability curve is very interesting. This is only for a W5 induction generator without considering the power tonic converter. Now here you can see that there is a limits are there. The below limit is, you can see, is about the stator current limit. So and the above limit is, right hand side is the above limit is mostly for the rotor current limit. Now but when you are able to see the limits for the low slip values, the limit is coming out from a rotor voltage. It means this, during the low slip values, the machine is not able to inject the reactive power to the grid, because you can see that capability curve is having only negative value up to some range of uh, active power production. So it means for a low value of slip, doubly fed induction generator is not able to inject or able to generate the reactive power. So this is a limit, and how this limit and why this limit is coming is due to that rating of a rotor voltage limit or the winding limits. And it means there is a problem here because W5 energy generator is not able to operate properly. So how to overcome this limit? So what we have considered that if we are able to increase the rating of the rotor voltage windings and as well as the rotor side converter little bit higher, then this limits can be overcome. So can you please go to the next slide? Now in this slide you can see a different limits of the rotor voltage is shown here, and the current limit is shown by dotted line, the left hand side figure. So slowly what we have done, we are able to see that if the rotor voltage rating winding ratings, if it is increasing by 30% to 38%, then suddenly we can see that a current limit of the rotor side is coming into the picture rather than the rotor voltage, and hence we can see that if the rotor winding of a W-fed engine is the current limit is going to come into the picture, and current limit can be increased very simply by having a winding with more current limits, like thicker winding is possible. So this is what the limits can also be increased. So this is how the rotor voltage limitation can be removed. Next slide please. So this capability curve is showing with a optimal value of rotor side converter, in which a rotor side converter as well as rotor voltage winding of W-fed induction generator is being enhanced, and hence now we can see the rotor voltage limit is overcome. Only the rotor current as well as stator current limit is now remain. So it means W-fed induction generator with power tonic converter are able to absorb the reactive power, are able to inject the reactive power. Both of the cases are possible. So this is what a capability curve of W-fed induction generator is can be obtained, and similarly all these curves can be combined together for a overall wind farm and can be provided to the transmission system operator, so that operating point can be known always. Next slide please. So what we have discussed earlier, that grid side converter can also act as a static compensator and will be able to provide the reactive power. So now you can see this expression above the figures, that Q, the reactive power from the grid side converter, can be obtained. So here we can see that this expression is having VGSC into IGSC square minus PR square, because PR square is the value of the rotor power which is being processed by the grid side converter. So once we are able to remove from the rating of this grid side converter, then we can see how much reactive power can be injected by the grid side converter without changing even its capability. So hence we are able to find out how much rotor power maximum can be processed. In this diagram we can see the rotor power is shown here, that how much rotor power is being generally processed. And once this curve is known to us, then we can easily find out that at every point, every operation point, that how much Q grid side converter is available and will be able to inject into the grid. So this is how a capability of carrying a current and voltage of a converter can be increased. Then obviously there is a more and enhanced capability is available with a converters to provide the reactive power. Fine. So next slide please. So this particular capability curve is shown with a series grid side converter also for a unified architecture. So similarly, we can see a capability is getting enhanced and enhanced, and this overall envelope of capability curve is increased with a more number of converter into the circuit. Fine. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So this is a inference what we are able to obtain when a technical grid connection requirements need to be addressed, as well as to provide the capability curve as desired by the transmission system operators. So now we can move to a next part of our discussions, that when a high capital or energy cost is there, then how it need to be addressed, or we can say what are the regulatory reforms are there by which we will be able to address the renewable energy sources uh, uh, and its promotion into the grid as compared to the thermal and hydro. So this slide is showing it, this data is bit old, but it is giving us a information that there are certain way of providing the subsidy and the assistance to the different type of renewable energy sources was being practiced at the India, and based on such type of subsidy, a good installation is being carried out in couple of decades in India, especially in the area of wind, and it is continuously helping the promotion of the renewable energy sources. Next slide, please. The major financial assistance was provided in the terms of accelerated depreciation, as well as the uh, tax exemption of the tax duties on the many parts of the systems being imported from the outside. And the accelerated depreciation provided a good input to the, especially to the few corporates who have financed so many number of wind farms and solar farms initially, and by which they also got a advantage of having a tax rebate. So this is very helpful for them. But there was a problem with such type of system which promotes only the installation part rather than of having a uh, providing a force or the push to not only the installation but also the increase in the generation capacity. So this was an important aspects, because many corporates, they have just to got the accelerated depreciation and the income tax benefit, they provided a installation of the wind farms, but whether the wind farms are in operation or they are producing the renewable energy or not, that was challenging part. So another scheme was also given by the government of India for a couple of years, and I think now it is not continuing from 1 or 2 years, known as generation-based incentive. So in that scheme, the generation was promoted, and based on the generation, a incentive was given at that time. That was somewhere like 50 paisa per unit, and as compared to, I think, a preferential tariff scheme. So these are the couple of schemes was given by the to promote the not only the installation also but the generation also. Next slide, please. So this slide is giving a different regulations issued by the different level, like central government level, central electricity regulatory or state electricity regulatory commission level, which promoted or helped the renewable energy by providing a regulatory framework, whether it is the Electricity Act 2003, which provided a open access, or a tariff policy, or a regulations which provided a preferential tariff mechanism, or by which a the costing of the renewable energy in that states can also be found out. So, and then finally the RPO, renewable purchase obligation, and renewable energy certificate mechanism also, which promoted more and more integration of the renewable energy sources. Next slide, please. A scheme which is mostly being adopted in country uh, is known as preferential tariff scheme. In this scheme, the state electricity regulatory commissions are based on the requirements and availability of land, availability of manpower, different tax rates. They are finding out what should be the preferential tariff for the different renewable energy sources so that they are viable and as well as making a decent profit. So this is what known as preferential tariff mechanism, or sometimes known as FIT, or known as feed-in tariff mechanism, and by which the renewable energy who are producing in a particular state is getting remunerated, and the states are liable to or bound to provide the this money to the renewable energy producer, and the systems are also being considered as a must run system or must dispatch system. So this is how they are being always promoted in the states. Next slide please. This slide is showing us a different preferential tariff. This is also a bit data is old, but it is giving us a hint that how the different charges are being levied, or the what was the preferential tariff for different type of renewable energy sources in different states, and they stability in the policy wise for the renewable energy sources, so that they can see that a project is going to be viable and able to give a return back to the wind farm developers or solar farm developers in coming 10 to 20 years. So this type of stability is also required for such installations. Next slide please. Meanwhile, if you are having any doubt, then please also let me know. Now coming to another topic of which is related to the regulatory framework is known as renewable purchase obligations. As I mentioned that RPOs are the requirements set by the State Electricity Regulatory Commission in the respective states, so that this is the minimum amount of energy need to be consumed in a state. So example that Delhi Electricity Regulatory Commission has given RPO of 1% and MP has given as a 10%. But the actual achievement could be different, but this is the targets are being given by the different states, and it is expected that if the states are not able to meet such requirements, RPO requirements, then there would be a severe penalties can also be levied upon them, and slowly we are able to see it is going to be happen, and the RPO requirements are getting stricter and stricter. So, but a problem is also being observed while meeting the RPO requirement. Next slide, please. What was the problem? The problem was that, as I mentioned initially, that whenever we are talking about the meeting of a RPO requirement, it is expected that the state is able to produce a reactive, a renewable energy and able to consume also. So, but some of the states are having geographical constraints, so they are not able to produce the renewable energy for their consumption, and or the number of uh, wind farm or solar farm or other renewable energy projects are also limited. So one option which was there, that why not to utilize the bilateral contract mechanism by which a wind farm or solar farm in another state will be able to provide the energy, and by based on wheeling charges they will be able to send it to the respective states, and they will be able to say that they have consumed the required renewable energy to meet the RPO requirement. So this is one of the mechanism was there. Another problem was also there, that the preferential tariff mechanism or generation based incentive mechanism are able to provide a steady and a stable income or the profit to the renewable energy producer, but is there any other mechanism by which they will be able to make a more profit, or a competition can also be brought in the between the renewable energy sources? So by considering these couple of factors, and especially to meet the RPO requirements, a renewable energy certificate mechanism is introduced. Next slide please. Next slide please. So renewable energy certificate regulations came in 2010, and the prime objective was to provide a certificate mechanism rather than actual consumption, actual generation of energy. So instead of this can be have a certificate mechanism by which a particular state is able to say that yes, I have brought these certificate, and means I have paid a or utilized the certain amount of renewable energy, so that the geographical constraints are removed, as well as the geographical installation as well as injection of the power can also be addressed, or this can provide a alternative mechanism of payment to the or remuneration to the renewable energy sources. All these factors are being considered in this renewable energy certificate mechanism. Let's understand what is this renewable energy certificate mechanism. Next slide, please. So to understand this REC mechanism, let's see this figure. Yes, so the upper figure is for the existing mechanism. So now see existing mechanism, what it is saying that a energy which is being or renewable energy which is being produced by the particular source can be treated as a energy from renewable and can be given to a distribution company, and it is the tariff which is determined by the regulatory commission known as preferential tariff. So this is what a existing mechanism is there. Fine. But now see the below figure. In the below figure, which is known as REC or renewable energy certificate mechanism, let's see how it is working. In this case, renewable energy is divided into two components. The one component is known as actual renewable energy, or known as attribute of the renewable energy. It means if electricity is being produced, whether this electricity is from the thermal source or hydro source or nuclear or from renewable energy, this is known as attribute. So this renewable energy is divided into two parts. One is the actual electricity, another one is known as attribute of word known as renewable. So this is now being divided into two parts. The electricity part is now sell or traded in a bilateral contract mechanism, or it is now being fed to the distribution company, and the remuneration is rather than preferential tariff, it is based on average power purchase cost of the host utility of the previous financial year. It means in the previous financial year, based on the different type of sources, what was the average power purchase cost of the previous year, it is now given to the renewable energy. It is now given to the renewable energy in this financial year. Fine. What about the attribute part? The attribute of the word renewable of this electricity being produced by the renewable energy is now treated as a certificate, and this certificate is now traded in a market as similar to the share market or a power exchange market, and there the certificate is going to be get a price between a floor price and the forbearance or a upper price. So it means certificate is now traded and between a range is there, and hence there could be a better profit can be obtained for this certificate. So this certificate can be brought in any power exchange by the respective states, and hence they will be able to say that we have produced this certificate. It means they are able to utilize this certificate to meet the RPO requirements. Any doubt in this till now? Then please let me know.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Okay, I have a small doubt, sir, here. With
Yes.
regards to the REC mechanism, you have separated out the electricity and REC. And does this mean that REC certification is given based on the quality of power that they are generating, and accordingly they are going to get additional benefit, monetary benefit, apart from the regular power generation?
Yes, you are right in a sense. that renewable energy is now having two components. One is the electricity, which is being traded as a either bilateral or as a average power purchase cost. Fine. So I will be going to give an example. Let's say preferential tariff is let rupees 4.5 for 1 unit of energy produced by the wind. Is this fine?
Okay.
Now, instead of having 4.5 rupees as a preferential tariff in the existing mechanism, what we are doing, we are saying, let's say, sell the electricity to the distribution company as a average power purchase cost. So typical average power purchase cost would be somewhere 2.5 rupees. So instead of 4.5 rupees as a preferential tariff, they will be going to get 2.5 rupees for the electricity component. And then the remaining money is going to be come from a certificate. So this certificate should be somewhere 2 rupees at least for that unit in energy. Otherwise, the preferential tariff mechanism is better. Or the this scheme of REC is going to give a loss to the wind farm operator. But in a REC certificate mechanism are going to be such that the minimum price, floor price should be 2 rupees and maximum price can go beyond 2 rupees, so that in the REC mechanism there is a possibility that some profit can be done. Fine.
So in the earlier in the existing mechanism, then the person who is generating the RES power is at loss because he will be getting only from the regulatory commission board, whatever tariff that they are setting. According to the example, get only 2.5 rupees.
Yes.
Okay.
No, it is not loss because electricity component is sold at 2.5 rupees and REC certificate is going to be sold at 2 rupees or more than 2 rupees, so that the REC mechanism always gives a value more than 4.5 rupees. Fine. So it would be always be more than the preferential tariff, but how much it is based on the market condition. Let's understand now.
Participants, if you're not asking the question, then please mute your mic.
Now please see the next slide.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Now please see this next. Now please see the next slide. In this slide, let's once again, this slide is giving us the same concept but with some different data. The renewable energy is divided into electricity component as well as REC certificate component. Electricity component can be sold as a bilateral agreement as well as can be sold as a average power purchase cost of the distribution utility. So in year to 2010 or somewhere, the average power purchase cost of the different state is given as here. Andhra Pradesh was having let 1.78 and Maharashtra, Karnataka, Kerala was given. So electricity component is sold at this value. Now from where the remaining part of this money is going to come as compared to the preferential tariff, it is going to be discovered in the market exchange. And below table you can see it is given as the upper price known as preference price or the floor price or the minimum price. So here earlier it used to have that non-solar and solar was used to be considered different because solar was very costly during 2010. This is the table and the data is from 2010 regulations. Now we can see that upper price let for a wind is somewhere this is for 1 megawatt hour. So it is let somewhere around 3.9 rupees per unit and the minimum price is 1.5. If you just take an example of Andhra Pradesh, let someone is selling the electricity at the Andhra Pradesh, they will get a electricity component of 1.78. They will get a minimum floor price of 1.5 rupees from the market exchange. So overall they are getting 1.78 and plus 1.5. So it means it is coming out somewhere more than 3 rupees. And this amount is almost equal to the preferential tariff. So hence it means the Andhra Pradesh wind will always going to get a money even at the floor price also of something near to the preferential tariff. But what about if the certificate is going to be sell at a value more than the minimum price, then it can go up to the forbearance price. So in all such conditions, the renewable energy certificate or renewable energy form or renewable form or wind form are going to make a profit which is more than the preferential tariff. So that's why this REC pricing mechanism is beneficial for the renewable energy sources, as well it is beneficial for the case of the states where they don't have the renewable energy in their states, and by utilizing this REC certificate mechanism they will be able to buy the certificate and will be able to claim that they have met the RPO requirement. The important question here is that how to decide on the floor price and forbearance price, because the certificate mechanism is executing or implemented at the national level, and this is a very interesting case study that how to decide on the floor price and forbearance price. Let's understood by coming few slides. Next
Sir,
slide
one
please.
more doubt, sir. So
Yes.
here the
Hmm.
price in every state is different. The average power purchase cost. How is that generally decided, sir?
Okay, so let understood this by taking an example. Let in Andhra Pradesh there are let 3 or 4 sources of energy is there. One is hydropower, one is thermal power, one is nuclear power, or one is renewable energy. So average power purchase cost is based on that particular state in the previous financial year has brought power from different sources, somewhere at 2 rupees, somewhere at 1 rupee, somewhere at 3 rupees, somewhere at 4 rupees. So average power purchase is calculated based on how much they have invested in buying the power and how much unit of power they have brought from different sources. So this is the how they are able to calculate the average power purchase cost. So it could be that some state is able to buy the having a good hydro potential, so their average power purchase cost is bit low as compared to different state. It depends on state to state. I hope this addressed your query.
Yes, sir, that was good.
Yeah.
But one more doubt, sir. Now, if I am in the border of a particular state, now let's take the example here between Andhra Pradesh and Maharashtra itself. If
Hmm.
I sell power to Andhra Pradesh, I will be at loss. But instead, if I sell the power to Maharashtra, then I will be benefited. Is there any regulations that I have to sell to this particular state only? Is it location based or anything like that, sir? If I am
Yes.
in Andhra Pradesh, I have to sell compulsorily to Andhra Pradesh.
Yes, you are right. The question is very genuine. After Electricity Act 2003, Government of India and the regulation has provided as a open access. Open access means anyone will be able to connect to the grid, can inject the power and can take the power. So this is what a open access broad meaning is that. In this case, the renewable energy producer or even other thermal power station or any energy source will be able to connect to the grid and inject to the grid if they are meeting all grid connection requirements, and they can have a bilateral contract with some other state. Let if you are in Andhra Pradesh, you want to inject the power into the Andhra Pradesh, you will be able to, based on your bilateral contract with the state utility, you will be able to get the money. It could be bilateral contract, it could be preferential tariff, anything is there. But let you are in Andhra Pradesh and you want to sell a power to the Delhi, which is very required a good amount of renewable energy. So you can do once again based on bilateral contract, but in this case you need to pay a wheeling charges also. What is the meaning of wheeling charges? Let you are injecting a power in the Andhra Pradesh, and after Andhra Pradesh up to the Delhi there are couple of states are coming. So they will in the electricity will take a minimum resistance path, but for the financial contract they will be going to ask you a wheeling charges. The meaning is that they are assuming that the power is going from Andhra Pradesh to the Delhi. There are many states are in between, and there is a power loss is there in the transmission line, and the other states are maintaining their transmission line. So this wheeling charges are going to be paid on that contract. So if you are going to sell in the Andhra Pradesh, your contract could be 3 rupees per unit. But when you are going to sell to the Delhi, even you are selling at the 3 rupees, there would be some wheeling charges would be there. So the Delhi is going to buy at the 3 rupees something paisa. So that's why the Delhi will not prefer to buy from the Andhra Pradesh. So this is how the wheeling charges or the transmission line losses are also being calculated in the financial mechanism. So that's why you can sell it to the Maharashtra. Obviously, you will get a benefit, but the wheeling charges you need to you need to pay for that Andhra Pradesh if you are selling to the Maharashtra. In that sense, the power may be bit costly. So that may also happen.
Thank you, sir.
Right?
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's see the next slide. No, this slide is okay. Renewable Energy Certificate Regulation 2010. There are some certain constraints are there that what is a eligibility in the certificate, dealing in the certificate, who, how to decide on pricing, what should be the validity of the certificate once it is issued. So please come to the next slide. So power exchanges are authorized for dealing of such certificate, where the certificates can be sold, can be brought. What about the validity? The validity of the certificate was given as a 1 year. Later on, some certificates was not able to sold in the 1 year itself. Then this validity got extended for 2 years, and sometimes it had a back and forth, and finally it got once again settled down on the 1 year validity of the certificate. And this certificate, one certificate is of 1 megawatt hour of electricity generated. So one REC is equal to 1 megawatt hour. So this is what a value is there. Next slide, please. One more slide, please. And a important and very interesting study is that how to find out the floor and forbearance price of REC certificate. So here you can see expression is there for floor price, the minimum price. Here the keyword is very important. The keyword is minimum. So this keyword is saying the project viability cost minus average power purchase cost. It means if let a wind farm is going to get 4.5 rupees, the project is viable. Means project is neither making profit nor making a loss. So and this 4.5 minus average power purchase cost, then that should be the floor price. Then our project is going to be in the REC certificate is going to be not profitable nor loss also. So that's why this is how the floor price is being obtained. But there is a word minimum is there. This is we will be going to understand by taking a particular case study, and this is why a some benefit is always there, even the certificate is being sold at the floor price. Similarly, the last line you can see of the forbearance price, which is preferential tariff minus average purchase power purchase cost. So it means this expression is giving us a indication that the maximum price which is of a certificate is obtained is not going beyond a preferential tariff, but in actual it is not happening. The maximum word which is written outside to this bracket is giving us a indication that there is a possibility that a benefit is always there beyond the preferential tariff also. Otherwise there is no point in going for the REC certificate mechanism. So this is what the two expressions, two formula that we'll be going to utilize in the coming few slide. Next slide, please. This particular slide is giving a indication that how to decide on different prices. So this particular slide is coming out from a national action plan on climate change. This is based on Government of India for different sources as well as electricity also. This target is saying that in 2010, the target was that 5% of the energy should be coming from renewable energy. It means certain amount of billion units of energy, and renewable energy generation was also given. So this is how we are able to identify. So please remember, this is 5% and 2011 it is 6%. These are the data which is important for us to calculation of the floor price and the forbearance price. Next slide, please. One more slide, please. Yes, so this is the table to find out the floor price. This table maybe not be visible exactly. Let me read for you for a couple of columns headlines. The first column is for the state and the technology of the renewable energy. The first data entry is Tamil Nadu wind, and the last entry is Chhattisgarh biomass. So this is what they are. The second column is at the supply, electricity supply at the end of 2010, which is given in million units. A data is given, and in 2011 our target is to have 6% of renewable energy, if you remember from the National Action Plan on the climate change. And then we are anticipating that if all such renewable energy technology are going to inject a power, then based on the 2010 and then additional of this, we will be able to meet our renewable energy target as per the National Action Plan on the climate change. And we are going to list down all these sources in a particular order. I will tell you how we are arranging this table in which particular order. The fourth column is giving us a renewable energy supply. So at the 2010 end, second column, we are having a value, and if we are going to add all this, then somewhere in the middle of this figure where the highlighted row is there, Karnataka wind and Tamil Nadu biomass, we can see that we will be able to meet our the 2011 target, which is 6% of renewable energy from the renewable energy sources in the electricity. So this is we are able to meet. So it means up to Karnataka wind and Tamil Nadu biomass, if we are going to select all these sources, we will be able to have a energy coming from the renewable energy as per our desired targets. This is what we can achieve. Now let's see the fifth column. Fifth column is the average power purchase cost of the different states, which is also listed. Tamil Nadu wind average power purchase cost in 29 and 10, which is like previous financial year of 2010, is given as 2.51 rupees. And similarly, all other states are also there. Then the sixth column is feasibility requirement. This is a very important. Tamil Nadu wind feasibility requirement. This is the first row is given as 2.8 rupees. What is the meaning of feasibility? The meaning of feasibility is that if a Tamil Nadu wind farm is able to get 2.8 rupees per unit, their project is viable. They are not making any profit as well as no loss. They are able to run the system without loss and profit. Then next entry is Rajasthan Small Hydropower, Rajasthan SHP. Their feasibility cost is 3.1 rupees. So this feasibility cost is given by State Electricity Regulatory Commission. So this is what a overall table is also having. Now see, very interesting thing is right hand side of this table, the most right hand side column, the last column is difference between the project viability and the APPC. It means the difference of the sixth and fifth column is listed in this last column. And finally, this particular column, the last column, is arranged in increasing order. Fine. I hope this is how you are able to get that this whole table is being inserted, the values, the datas are inserted, and the last column is calculated, and then the table is reordered or rearranged in a increasing value of the last column. Now you can see Tamil Nadu wind is going to have the APPC of 2.51, feasibility is 2.8, and the difference between these two is coming out 0.29 paisa. So it means if they are going to get 0.29 paisa and the APPC is 2.51, then they are going to get a feasibility cost. It means neither they are making profit nor they are making loss. Let's see, we have arranged this table in a ascending order based on the last column. So the Karnataka wind and Tamil Nadu biomass, the row which is highlighted here, you can see is the sources. If these sources and above all sources are going to be selected, then India is able to meet its 6% of the renewable energy requirement. It means all sources above the Karnataka wind, if they are going to be selected, then we will be able to meet our renewable energy requirement of 2010 and 2011. And the prices, the difference between is coming out is in the last column is 1.43 rupees. If we are going to give the floor price to all sources selected above the Karnataka wind as 1.43, it means then this is our floor price. Now let's see what a Tamil Nadu wind is going to get when the floor price is selected as a 1.43. One, they are getting a average power purchase cost of 2.51 rupees. The floor price is coming out 1.43. If we add these two, then what is the minimum price they are able to get from the certificate? And this mechanism, it is 2.51 plus 1.43. So it would be somewhere 4 rupees. So feasibility cost of the Tamil Nadu wind is 2.8, but they are getting 4 rupees based on APPC and as well as the difference between the feasibility and APPC, which is 1.43. So it means every source which is going to get the floor price of 1.43, it is going to make a profit and a good profit. And hence, this is how we are deciding in the floor price. If you are having any doubt in this, then please let me know. If you are having any doubt, then please let me know. Otherwise, next slide, please.
Hello, sir. I have one doubt.
Yeah.
Sir,
Yes,
actually,
please.
Tamil Nadu, they have their generation, renewable generation, Tamil Nadu, and if considering the floor price of Karnataka, you told that is a 4 rupees. But actually, practically, is it possible?
Yes, your question is half right. The reason is that we are not giving as a Karnataka wind 1.43. We are giving them as a 1.43, which is coming out from this overall table. It doesn't matter whether it is Karnataka wind or Tamil Nadu biomass. Fine. This is the way by which we are calculating that if we are going to give floor price of this 1.43, let an example, Karnataka wind is getting 1.43. So what will happen? They are just making 2.35 plus 1.43. They are making feasibility of 3.78. Then we are saying that all sources above Karnataka wind is going to make a profit more than the feasibility if they are going to be producing and getting a floor price as per the renewable energy certificate mechanism. Above Karnataka wind, in the below this table, they will not be making either if they are going for a REC certificate mechanism, either they are going to get a feasibility or they are going to make loss. So they may go only to the preferential tariff mechanism. It is up to them. But overall, this is the way by which we are deciding on the pricing of a floor price of the renewable energy certificate.
Definitely, sir. But actually, practically, we know as there is the amendment called into Electricity Act 2020. If this is the way of trading, then no electricity board will oppose the amendment 2020. In that, the central government has withdrawn the power from the state government, and they are forcing them to purchase the particular quantity from the power station or generation of their state only.
For that, I'm not aware of Electricity Act 2020, so I'm not able to comment on this. Let me just comment only the REC certificate mechanism. This certificate mechanism is provided to meet especially the RPO requirements.
Yeah, definitely.
And it is also making sure that renewable energy sources are able to get a minimum price, what they generally known as feasibility. It means they are not making any loss. but they are also going to have some profit if a market is required. Sometimes if a RPO, to meet the RPO requirements, if a more number of states are interested in buying the certificate, then the price is not going to stay at the floor price. It will go up to the ceiling price. In that case, some of the renewable energy sources may get a bit profit. But if the demand of the RPO requirements to meet the RPO requirement is not there, then all the certificates are just lying at the floor price. So then there is even no such profit is also there. If each individual states are able to get their resources itself, then they are not interested even in buying the REC certificate. So it is more like a play of demand and supply also. So there is no guarantee that every time certificates are being sold at the ceiling price.
Definitely, sir. For your knowledge, I can share that in the recent amendment 2020, all the utility of Indian government, all the utility of India has opposed this concept. In this concept, as previously Madam told that from some participant already raised the question, if the generation in Andhra Pradesh is rate is less and including wheeling charges, if that is preferable to Maharashtra to purchase from Andhra Pradesh, then why should Maharashtra go to purchase from Maharashtra itself? They can purchase from Andhra Pradesh with energy charges plus wheeling charges. That amount is less than the amount of average cost of supply in Maharashtra. But government has given some restriction on this, and that is already included in the amendment. That's why I'm surprised for all these things. Anyway, thank you, sir.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Then my comment on your question would be something like this, that if we see that we understand that every state is going to be have a difficulty in buying the power from a cheaper sources and like that. In that my sense, then if we are going for a true decentralized or deregulated market, then such type of situation will always arise where a cheaper sources are going to get a more preference as compared to the costlier sources. So this is what always a market is there. Now we are just always see that we can also buy whichever airlines are there. So this is how a similar scenario will also happen. Yeah. Okay. So next slide. Yes, this slide, which is now deciding on the forbearance price of previous slide, please. Yes, so this is the last slide for this session. This is how we are able to identify a forbearance price. This table is also once again arranged in a particular fashion. In the right-hand side column, the most right-hand side column is a column in which ascending order this table is arranged. The first column is about the state. Second column is about the renewable energy technology of that particular state. Third column is the 2010 availability of renewable energy. Fourth column is the 2011 renewable energy being anticipated, which they are going to be injected into the grid, and this is based on the 6% requirement of the target of the National Action Plan on Climate Change. Then renewable energy supply based on the cumulative of addition of these sources, fifth column. Sixth column is the tariff as per the renewable energy tariff regulation, or known as preferential tariff. Then the second last column is the average power purchase cost, and the last column is the difference between the tariff and the average power purchase cost. Then take an example of Tamil Nadu wind, which is the first row, which is saying that 4.17 is the preferential tariff, APPC is 2.51, and difference is coming out 1.66. So it means if a Tamil Nadu wind is going to get 1.66 as a highest price also, then based on the REC certificate mechanism, the Tamil Nadu wind is going to get the same amount what a preferential tariff mechanism is there. But in this case, it means there is no profit as compared to the preferential tariff mechanism. But in this case, what is going on? This table is arranged in an ascending order, and the last source, which is known as, because if you remember the formula for the forbearance price is there, the preferential tariff minus APPC and the bracket close and the maximum. So that's why this word maximum is coming, because this due to this maximum, the last column ascending order is arranged and the last entry is being considered, which is now maximum of these differences is now 3.82. It means Tamil Nadu Wind is also going to get a maximum price of the REC certificate can go up to 3.82. Let in a particular year, if the Tamil Nadu Wind is going to get a 3.82, APPC cost is 2.51, and addition of this is going to be beyond 5 rupees, and hence it is value is beyond preferential tariff of 4.17. So it means Tamil Nadu Wind is able to make a profit if the certificate in that year is sold at the maximum price. So this is how a certificate mechanism is there, which varies the value from a floor price to the forbearance price. It means renewable energy certificates are able to provide a alternative commercial state settlement for the renewable energy technology other than the preferential tariff, or known as feed-in tariff, and this may provide a additional benefits to the renewable energy sources to get more profit, as well as this also provide a opportunity to the states to meet the RPO requirements by buying out this type of renewable energy certificates. So with this, I would like to stop here. Any query and question or comments are there, I would be happy to discuss that.
Participants, if you have any doubt, please ask. Otherwise, we will conclude the session. Okay, sir. I think already discussion is done. And sir, thank you for accepting our invitations, and you deliver the lecture in your tough situations. And participant definitely benefited about the wind energy and RES. So thank you, sir. Once again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your invitation, and thank you to all participants. Slides I have already shared with the organizers, you may get, and if you are having any comments, queries, I would be able to happy to discuss over emails, and would be happy to interact with you further.